We have laws that I've mentioned that are not so perfect. But why is the government always so keen to implement laws that favors either individuals, a certain group of people, or a large collective that appears to favor those in power?
Hello everyone, welcome to WebTV Focus program. We spotlight issues of interest to household. I am Gabriel, Jude from Lagos, Nigeria. To begin the program, let me start with this thought that accountability in governance is critical to the sustainability of any country in the world. Nigeria, the Africa's largest democratic nation, marked its 65th anniversary since independence. Despite 28 years of military rule, the unbroken democratic dispensation since 1999 presents a great opportunity for Nigeria to lead Africa with a model of governance that is citizen-based and value consensus. Now, I would like to conclude with this random question. Is Nigeria's current governance structure a citizen-based and value consensus? Well, let me leave you with that to answer. But having said that, the conversation today will be on governance and accountability in Nigeria, and I am doing this with Mr. Kolawole Oluwadare. He is a Deputy Director of the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, known as SERAP. SERAP is a non-governmental organization which drives advocacy for good governance. You're welcome on the program, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Right. Let's quickly listen to some comments from Nigerians on accountability and governance before we continue the program.
For a country of this magnitude that can achieve a lot of great things, we are not where we should be. So in order to improve this country, being 65 and all, we are quite old, we are no longer a young country. But in order to improve, I'll say everybody has to participate. You don't have to go directly to your president, the local government chairman, your senators, House of Reps. All these people make laws that affect your lives every single day. So if we can start from the grassroots and engaging our leaders, then from there we can see how we can make more stronger positions that the president and the governors can now take accountability on.
We have a long journey ahead of us, and I genuinely do not think this set of people in power are the ones that will get us to where we need to go. Right? I think again, these are the set of people that have been in power. It has been rinse and repeat for a long time, and I think we need new people in the system. We need people that will take us from where we are to where we need to be and actually do the hard work of taking us to where we need to be.
To improve their governance and accountability, I would suggest whoever that is in governance, or whenever it gets to anybody's turn, to govern, the person should have, or the administration at that time or currently should have an open mind to listen, have an open mind to take corrections, because there's this popular saying that says, a tree does not make a forest. You understand? It takes plenty trees to say this particular place is a forest. You understand? So they should just have an open mind to listen. When you are looking at 6 from the other angle, it looks like 9. When you're looking at 9 from the other angle, it looks like 6. So you need to gather all the information you need to gather to make an informed judgment.
There's insecurity in the country. There's hunger in the land. Our youths are there just wasting away, they're so idle, doing nothing. So if they can engage our youth, take care of security, all sectors have their own one issue or the other. So at least if there's one thing we can hold on to now to say, okay, this is what the government is doing for us, we will appreciate it.
I genuinely do not think there are infrastructures in place in Nigeria for the average person to grow, for the average business to grow. If we're not dealing with light, we're dealing with something. So I do not think the first world countries are better than us in the sense of we are hardworking, we're smart. Nigerians are one of the smartest people, we're brilliant. But again, I do not think the government gives us the infrastructure, the room, to be our very best. I am proud to be Nigerian. Any day, anytime. If I was not in Nigeria, I'll probably be pained. We're smart, we're go-getters, we are doing great things outside our country. Why? Because infrastructures are in place for us to do great things in those places. So that's just it. Give us room to grow, give us water, give us fertilizer, give us soil, and we'll bloom.
If they can address the issue, especially our youth, it will save Nigeria a lot.
If the basic structure is set in place, then small businesses and private individuals can also come and help in. Also, people living abroad. We have a lot of diaspora who can regularly come to Nigeria and have their private investments, and this will always boost our GDP and tourism across the country. The same way 30 December is becoming a thing. Imagine if you can have it in different parts of the country, and everybody's trying their own parts. Farming, entertainment, tourism, all these are serious places the government should look at, and also we as a people should focus on improving.
Right. Are you a proud Nigerian?
Of course I am. And that speaks in the kind of work that I do, where I work, and the various public advocacies that I'm engaged in on behalf of the organization. Of course, the answer is yes.
Okay, so in one sentence, how would you describe Nigeria at 65?
I think I would agree with the summation of those that we listened to in the Vox Pop. Nigeria has potential, but the issue has always been governance. And governance issue, of course, we can agree emanate from societal norms and values. But from the experience we've had, to give a good benchmark from 1999, we are yet to get aspects of governance right. And that has been the problem.
Okay, so looking at the Nigerian's current governance structure from federal, state to local government level, has it enabled accountability, transparency? What are the gaps you think you could identify within this time democracy?
I think it's very important in answering this question that we understand what are those structures, as it were. Perhaps we are making allusions to the federal kind of system, which has, of course, 3 tiers of government, and within that, which is federal, state, local. And we also have the 3 arms of government. We have the judiciary, legislative, and the legislative. Now, looking at our experience since 1999, the problem has not been the legal framework, the laws, as it were. Of course, laws are not meant to be perfect. As a tool of social engineering, laws are reworked from time to time to meet the realities of each society. So the 1999 Constitution, being the Grundom and other laws, are not the problem. I think the problem with what I would call political will. And I'll define political will from one of the write-ups I've written in the past, which is yet to be published, as the willingness of the individual in public office to either implement a policy, enact a law, or to do an act. And that willingness or lack of it might be in individual interest, it might be in a selective interest of a group of few, and it might also be in a collective interest. That, I think, is a problem. And I'll give you a very good example. We have laws that I've mentioned that are not so perfect. But why is the government always so keen to implement laws that favors either individuals, a certain group of people, or a large collective that appears to favor those in power? A very good example. The federal government went to court to challenge, as well, federal government against the states to establish local government autonomy, which is constitutional, as it were, but needed the Supreme Court's interpretation. The Supreme Court has ruled, yet the federal government who went to court as a plaintiff is yet to implement. That suggests that that lawsuit itself might have been politically driven. And it is not in the president's interest to implement those laws. I bet you, if the court gives a judgment that is against the opposition today, you will see the strength and the speed with which that judgment will be enforced. SERAP has more than 11 judgments against the government that is yet to be implemented. But government can pick and choose which policy or judgment, as it or even law, to implement per time. That is that absence of a political will to use governance tool to favor the people, but to use it in the selfish interest.
So how do you speak of the incident of Fubara in River State, as it were? Well, we see that there was suspension. I think you mentioned some laws, constitutional laws are not out.
Again, you would see the president purportedly, and from the aides who had come to speak in his favor, I'm talking of President Tinubu, appeared to legitimize that action. But we at SERAP believe that that act was unlawful, that is declaring a state of emergency in River State. We went to court, and I think some other people went to court. As of today, at least SERAP's suit is yet to be determined. If that suit was filed to determine the legitimacy of the president or a governor in the ruling party, I can assure you, judgment will be out now. And that again shows the unwillingness, the lack of that political will to use the legal frameworks that we have, albeit imperfect as it may be, in the interest of the people.
Okay, so now let's talk about your work experience of advocacy for good governance, topically what you do in SERAP. So how critical are strong institutions enabling this good governance transparency that will impact the household?
Exactly, and that is why institutions are set up. Institutions are not people. They are structures set up by laws to give effect to what they do. So there are different ones. For instance, law enforcement agencies, the EFCC, the ICPC, the Nigerian police, a lot of them are set up with specific mandates to do specific acts. But over the years, like I've alluded to, it is not the legal framework that set up these organizations that are problematic. It is the lack of a political will to implement those laws. I'll give you a very good example. Section 85 of the 1999 Constitution provides the office of the Auditor General of the Federation. And what does this office do? It audits the income and the expenditure of government annually and provides a report. And what that simply means in simple audit sense is to see how much was budgeted to each MDA, Ministry Department and agencies of government, how much they got in terms of environment, how it was spent, and if it followed the procurement or audit processes. This office, that is the Office of the Auditor General, has been providing reports annually. The latest being the 2021 report, detailing how a lot of MDAs, sometimes ranging into hundreds, could not account for trillions of naira. This report has been sent to the Public Account Committee of the National Assembly. Nothing has been done about it. These MDAs still get allocations. They still got allocations this year. Meanwhile, the president wants to convince the Nigerians that Nigeria is broke and we had gone a borrowing again. Whereas we see evidence done by a public officer, the Auditor General, that millions in dollars and sometimes trillions in naira could not be accounted for, and the president has done nothing to recover those funds. Would you say it is the constitutional framework that is problematic? No, it is because it's not in the political interest or personal interest of the government to pursue that and implement that law.
Now, in the case of the arms of government, which is, I want to speak specifically on legislative arm of government. So we have so for the Senate, is it impactful for a president to determine who heads the Senate?
Of course, no. That has never been the intention of the Constitution, either in practical terms or the law. And that is why the Senate president emerges based on the votes of peers, which is why it takes place within their peers, those in the National Assembly for the Senate and in the House of Reps, those in the House of Representatives. But we know politically, sometimes these things can be influenced. But that influence goes against the spirit of separation of powers and the principle of checks and balances. The three arms of government are not supposed to be at each other's throats, but they are supposed to create a balance. Whereas the executive doesn't have too much power, the judiciary does not, the legislature does not. It's a tripod that ensures that government works well. But if politically there is influence from the executive who emerges as the head of the National Assembly, you can understand, even without going into the practical details of what happens, that becomes problematic initially. Oh, absolutely. And it may not turn out to be that in practice, but ultimately, it affects the legitimacy and the perception of the National Assembly in that regard. And you must understand in politics, or perhaps it's something of a social norm, sometimes perception is more important than reality. And that is why you see in justice, they would say, justice must not only be done, but it must be seen to have been done. So if the people perceive that there is a lack of legitimacy in the leadership of the National Assembly, it creates a problem, not an issue, which may not translate to problems in practical terms, but it's problematic nonetheless. Which is why the emergence of the leadership of the National Assembly should be free and fair and must be seen to be so.
I think that issue needs to be revisited as we look forward to having a better Nigeria. But then let me take you back a bit on some concerns we have seen, some incidents that we've seen recently. So one of the demands, I'm talking about the end bad governance protests that we saw recently. So one of their demands was that the protesters said that the Constitution, 1999 Constitution, should be scrapped. But I want to ask you, do you think there is a need for a new constitution or the ongoing amendment, as it were, the National Assembly said they are amending the constitution will help us improve our governance, accountability, transparency, and all of that?
Laws anywhere in the world are not perfect. They evolve over time, which is why the concept of amendment itself was built in the 1999 Constitution along with other constitutions in the world. But the problem is not the framing of the law. If the framing of the law is a problem, perhaps I'll give it a small 10%. The bulk of the problem, which forms 90%, will be the lack of political will to implement the law. And I'm talking of the Constitution in this instance. And I've given you an example of one of the accountability frameworks of the Office of the Auditor General, which is a constitutional provision that has been neglected so far. So amending the Constitution will make the Constitution better, but it will not improve the problem of lack of political will to implement the law, as it were. And so I think from the report of the National Assembly last month, I think there were more than 86 issues tabled in constitutional amendment. And when you run through the list, of course, they are germane and they are valid, they are legitimate concerns. But the issue with those sections, including state creation, for instance, state police, is not that doing those things will make the Constitution better in practice. It would only make the Constitution better in principle. But what about the practical realities of it? If we are talking about the state police, for instance, how has the federal police as we have today fared? And then how can we make sure that whatever perceived injustice we perceived in the use of the Nigerian police does not go to the state police? And so it is not just amending the Constitution, as it were, is to ensure that there is a willingness. And this willingness can be brought about by the citizens who can exact this authority on those in power to ensure that the laws are implemented the way they are. And that is why you see in governance, those in public office, whether they're elected or appointed, are called duty bearers, while the citizens are called right holders. And that is why it is the citizens that brings this force to bear, as it were, through legal means, to ensure that government does the right thing. So even if we amend the 1999 Constitution now, of course, we amended it like 4 or 5 times already, it will not cure the defects that we seek to cure if we do not ensure that those in public office who will implement the Constitution and other laws do so on behalf of the citizens, and that they must do it or face.
So which one are you supporting? The amendment or how practical?
Amending the Constitution is fine, but amending it will not solve the problem. So if you ask me, we should focus more on holding those who should implement the current Constitution, as it were, with the 5th Amendment. We should hold them responsible and accountable with the same energy that we're using to pursue constitutional amendment. But this is not the first time the National Assembly has gone around the country claiming to want to amend the Constitution. What has come out of the previous exercises?
Let's talk about the role of civil society in shaping governance in Nigeria beyond 2025. So what do you see in this context?
The role of civil society is just like the role of what you call several interest groups in the country. And I'll say in the interest of Nigeria, in the history of Nigeria, looking at 1999, for instance, or pre-1999, and that is before the military left, civil society has always been vibrant. And we need to understand what is civil society here. It's just groups of people. You can, for instance, people will say, for instance, that the NBA, the Nigerian Bar Association, is civil society. It's a group of people representing a professional group, but of course, they also play a role in civil society. SERAP, for instance, will be an aspect of civil society because we're a non-governmental organization. And these institutions have always worked to promote democracy. But do the people understand the role of these institutions? And is the government open and willing enough to understand what civil society do without trying to either stifle the civic space where civil society plays or to label them as opposition? So if you ask me, the short answer to what you've said is civil society can ensure that government is accountable to the people. But the people understand that government should be accountable to them and not to political or tribal or religious interests. And the second question, is the government open enough to hear critical voices, the voices they might not necessarily like, and to understand that everything we're doing as civil society is to ensure that governance and government works for everybody. Because even those in public office today, whether they're elected or appointed, when they leave or they are removed, because they can be removed, will also come back to the same society and bear the brunt of whatever we are facing now that we are telling them, but they may not be listening.
Right. That's very profound. I want to say that an average Nigerian love what SERAP is doing. You know, so let me, for example, when I first saw read a headline about SERAP, I think can't really remember, but there was a case that the SERAP sued the federal government about. Now, in terms of accountability, in terms of use of funds, those are the issues you constantly raise. against the government, the public. But I would like to know, as SERAP, do you have somewhere or someone or an agency or an organization or an oversee that you submit to in terms of accountability? Maybe to checkmate, corrupt practices in your operations and your jurisdiction.
It's very important to understand what SERAP is, and I think we've alluded to that. SERAP is a non-governmental organization. It is a private organization, as it were. Government is a public institution, and the tenet of democracy means state clearly that the government is accountable to the people. The structures that make these two different organizations accountable are different. We have laws that guide SERAP, for instance. SERAP was set up and incorporated with the Corporate Affairs Commission, and we do file returns, we pay taxes, we do a lot of things regulated by government, as it were. That is a different perspective to the accountability of government to the people, and you cannot match both. I'll give you an example. Asset declaration. I am not mandated to declare my assets. I'm a private citizen, even though I work with SERAP. But the president, the local government chairman, is mandated by law to submit their assets. And they must be filed with the Code of Conduct Bureau, who would verify and investigate and ensure that there is no corrupt practices. We cannot equate those two practices together. To give you another example, as an organization in SERAP, we do file returns to the Corporate Affairs Commission. That is a form of regulation. But for public officers, there are different kinds of regulations that guide them. For instance, the Procurement Act. If government wants to buy a car, the Procurement Act, which is federal, and the procurement law in the state, states clearly what should be the bidding process, the threshold for payment of cash, and how payments are paid either in bulk or in parts. That doesn't apply to a private entity. So the strictures and the structures of accountability are different. And more often than not, when this kind of conversation comes up at the risk of sounding defensive, what government does is to deflect the demand for accountability for the government to that of the individual, whereas the two platforms are different.
All right. So as we wrap up, this will be the last one. In 1 minute, if you were to advise Nigeria as a country.
Are you sure 1 minute will be enough?
All right.
So who am I advising? The president or the citizens? The duty bearers or the right holders?
Start from the president.
I doubt if 1 minute will be enough for the president, but I'll try.
All right.
I think the president should, as they say, it's a cliche, pardon me, put his money where his mouth is. He has spoken about his intentions to fight corruption, and he needs to demonstrate that. And there are lots of ways to demonstrate that. From the aspect of SERAP, we need the president to be transparent and accountable and show it to Nigerians. And that starts, for example, from public declaration of his assets. It also means that he can compel his ministers and those who work with him to do so because he has set an example. And that also means that when it comes to budgeting and expenditure, the president shows that leadership by showing Nigerians that he is cutting costs and not spending millions of naira on buying private jets or renovating the residence of the vice president. That, Mr. President, does not demonstrate a commitment to fighting corruption. And as for Nigerians, my advice would be that Nigerians should continue to advocate within lawful means for accountability and transparency. But those must be done without tribalism, politics, and religion, which I think are the problems that affect the way we engage with government.
I would have loved that we go insight to this conversation, but then there's no time. Right. So thank you so much for coming on the program, and thank you so much for sharing your insight and how looking forward to see that Nigeria becomes a better place for all of us. I mean, I think with this now, we're moving forward.
Amen.
Right.
Thank you very much.
And that will be all for this edition of WebTV Focus program. For more information and knowledge on finance, the market, banking, economy, and investing, please visit the brochure website, WebTV YouTube, and follow our social media platform displayed on the screen. Moreover, if you have any concerns or questions about what we do, or maybe you have a concern you want us to raise in the course of our program, do well to put them in the comment section, and that will be appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching. I am Gabriel Jude, and have a great day.